In this position, I detonated the first brilliant move of this video. It looks like my attack has absolutely slowed down. I have to basically bail out at this point. I have to take the bishop, maybe find another way in. But here, and you're more than welcome to pause before I tell you the answer, the move is rook takes f3. You always need to look for things that are only guarded by the king, because oftentimes the king has to be the defender. And walk out into the open. Rook f3 is a shocking move. The eval goes from a +1 to -5 in one go. Now, obviously, when you get faced with a move like this, you probably have to take it, because what else do you do, right? I mean, if you just let me hang out here, I'm going to crush you. So my opponent takes, and that allows my rook to come in, and we have the same position, but there's no f-pawn, which allows the next brilliant move, rook f2. Two rooks sacrifice right next to the king's face, and the king's defenses are shredded. If you take on f2, it's takes, it's king here, it's e4. And knight here, it's mate. It's a checkmate surrounded by the queen, bishop, and knight, even though I'm down 2 rooks. So my opponent doesn't want to do this. Instead, my opponent decides to run, abandon everybody. The problem is that in this position, I still have the move e4, although it was actually slightly more accurate to play knight takes bishop. We're not going to talk about that though. e4, knight e4, and I hunt the king out into the open. c5 check. Opponent could consider pawn takes here en passant and trying to hang out back there, but the opponent just makes a run for it, just grabs the knight and runs. And in this position, because it's blitz, I for some reason did not see mate in 1. But that's why I included this game, because it was very funny. That's mate in 1. But, you know, when you see mate in 1, you might as well go for mate in 4. And my opponent's king gets smothered to death in my territory among my pieces, while all the pieces of my opponent stood all the way back there doing nothing. So, very fun game. Rook takes f3, followed by rook f2 infiltration. This is why I love the Portuguese gambit. It leads to these super creative games where instead of checkmating your opponent in one move, you checkmate them in a couple. But I digress. Now, it's time for brilliant move number 2. And brilliant move number 2, you would think, has something to do with a king attack. It doesn't. Although, rook takes f3. What? But I just said, okay. Well, now you're obviously looking at rook f8, but then the king just goes back to where it came from. So then you say, okay, well, I'm going to go queen h3. You can't go back. And the king's like, so? What am I afraid of? Rook f8 check is impossible if I move my queen out of the way, right? So, what's the idea of rook takes f3? It's this. This is an incredible, like, this just almost never happens, right? And the point is, I'm going to win 2 pieces for the rook, and I'm going to have a winning advantage. That's the point. I sacked my rook, hunted the king into the open, but I backwards move. And if you sack the queen, obviously, at the end of this, I have a fork, so I'm picking up a bishop. And queen d5, here's the cherry on top. Queen d5 is a great move. I can't just take the bishop, I hang my queen. I can't take the queen and then take the bishop, because then I hang my knight. All tactical sequences that are considered brilliant have like a cherry on top. The point is that after queen d5 offering a trade, I slide into the check and out of the way of the queen, and then I pick up the bishop. Okay, so how are we going to break through in this position? We're going to try to remove the defender of key squares. The problem is that it's not really happening yet, and knight c4 attacks my rook. By the way, if you notice, I'm still hanging my queen so I can get a new queen. But how are we going to tip the balance here over completely winning for white? We're going to play our second brilliant move of this game, ignoring the threat on the rook as well. Rook is hanging, queen is hanging, but we bring the second rook to escort the a-pawn. The only reason I'm not rushing with a8 queen is that it can just be taken, and I've just lost the pawn for nothing. So I play rook a1, and my opponent takes my rook and is now up a little bit of material if you do the math, but obviously my A and B pawns are super strong.